Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Screen Society podcast, a podcast that covers all things TV, movies, and everything you get on your screen. I'm your host, Logan, and today we are jumping back into Shrinking Season 3, Episode 7, and it was called I Will Be Grape, which was another fantastic episode by the Apple TV Plus and Bill Lawrence crew. I just really enjoy this show. I think that I've seen multiple times online where people are deeming it the best TV show as far as quality on any of the streaming platforms. I know the Pit would probably have a lot to say about that, but I would say that it's pretty close to being one of my favorite shows. And I think it's a show that's kind of gone under the radar for a pretty long time. I think that it really is about Apple TV Plus, I think, being underrated in the quality of content that they create. I do think that there are people that uh, might not have Apple TV Plus. I think that if they're going to subscribe to streaming services, I think that the most popular, obviously, Netflix being the crowning jewel of them. But I think that people will lean towards Hulu as well because it does put all live TV next day out for you. So there is that, and then there is the fact that people are still paying for YouTube TV, Fubo, and the different TV channel streaming services. HBO Max is pretty popular, Paramount and Peacock as well. So you've got a lot of choices, and I do think that because the library of content is not necessarily the biggest with Apple TV, they are growing steadily, but they are still, I think, the smallest as far as content library is concerned without having to purchase. People do tend to bypass it and might not be subscribed. And I know that people are listening to this episode are like, you don't have to tell me. I'm listening to a podcast that is season 3, episode 7 of a recap. But I do think that there is, if anybody's jumped into this and happened upon this or is listening to this, I do think that it's worth definitely mentioning Shrinking as one of the top shows, one of the best written shows on television. And I still think that Bill Lawrence is up there as far as a person that is a creator, a writer, a producer, an executive producer, director. He does all sorts of things. He wears many hats. He's been in a lot of his shows, but everything that he and his tree have created, the people that fall underneath the Bill Lawrence umbrella, I think that they just create gold. I mean, you've got Scrubs, which is returned as one of the best comedies to ever air as a revival with 11 million viewers. You have a show that just premiered on HBO Max called Rooster, and Rooster, it debuted to the best comedy has seen on HBO Max for like a year. So anything that he touches, I mean, Ted Lasso, same kind of thing. Anything Bill Lawrence creates or helps co-create, I think that there is a good chance that it's going to be one of the best shows on television. And I think that he has definitely earned that respect in that regard of being one of the best to ever do it. And I'm just glad that Scrubs is back. I love Scrubs. I'm glad Shrinking is as good at I can't talk today. Shrinking is as good as it is because again, everything I've ever gotten from Bill Lawrence, I've really loved. So I continue my success rate with him on shows that I really enjoy and then go into my favorite TV shows of all time. But we're back to talk about a very heavy episode of Shrinking. This aired on Wednesday, March 11th, and it aired on Apple TV Plus. The synopsis, I probably should have pulled that up so that way I could read it off. So let me pull that up real quick on IMDb it's always weird. They always do like really short synopses where, some of the other thing, like on the TV guide and stuff like that, the synopses are always a lot longer, I feel. But this one on IMDb, it says, the title of the episode again, I Will Be Grape, and Alice and Jimmy celebrate Tia's birthday. Liz's mother-in-law visits, and Paul ponders his legacy. And it was an 8.5 and currently sits as an 8.5 on IMDb. And I thought that our core characters got a lot of runtime here in this episode. I do feel that there were a lot of very impactful moments for a lot of our characters, especially moving forward and what this means. So there has been more attention as this season winds down, because I think this season of Shrinking is gonna have. Let me pull it up just in case. I think last time I said it had slotted 11 episodes. Um, Last season was 10. This season, I'm trying to find the episode guide. Yeah, this season will have 11 episodes, and has been renewed for season 4. Now, Bill Lawrence was interviewed. This was during the Scrubs press tour, I think. He was asked about, because Ted Lasso is returning this year. You have Shrinking that is currently going on. You have uh and so you have Shrinking, Scrubs, and then you have the return of Ted Lasso. So Bill Lawrence was asked about each of the shows that he currently has a big hand and big part in. And he said that because he was asked specifically if Scrubs was meant to be kind of the season 3 season story arc that Ted Lasso had. And Bill said that Scrubs has always kind of existed as a different type of entity for him, just as Cougar Town was as well. Where Scrubs, he and Zach and Donald are not really working on this to make it a 3 season arc. They said they just kind of want to do as many seasons as they feel tells the next story of the chat or next chapter of the story. So they could go on for as many seasons as they want. It wasn't necessarily written at the beginning to be a 3 season arc. Whereas Ted Lasso was written as a 3 season arc for the core characters. At least this first part of Ted Lasso. Season 4, as we know of Ted Lasso, will feature a girls team, the women's team. And so Ted is returning. A lot of the main characters are returning from Ted Lasso. The boys from the boys team, I believe, are not really in the show at all. So they're moving all of those characters out. But Ted's returning. Hannah Waddingham's character is returning. Rebecca. I think Keely's back in it as well. There wasn't mention of Roy Kent, but I'm assuming Brett, that's why he's left Shrinking this early, is that he had to go and work on Ted Lasso. So I'm assuming he's going to be in some of it. But they have kind of ushered in this new cast of characters for Ted Lasso, which is going to be the women's team. But again, they'll have 2 or 3 of our mainstays still around. I then read that Bill Lawrence and Sudeikis had planned that out when Ted Lasso had started, that they were going to do a 3 season arc and then they could continue on with the 4th season. And they didn't know if they had plans to continue with a 4th season. They were just kind of up in the air about it. And that's the way that they're treating Shrinking as well. So Shrinking has been so popular for Apple TV Plus. Obviously, Apple wants to renew because it brings viewership to their platform. So they renewed before season 3 even aired. It broke that season 4 was coming. But as we have gotten into season 3, it does appear that some of our characters might be leaving the show. And again, I think Bill Lawrence, and he did say this, he said the same thing with Shrinking. They had kind of planned this 3 season arc for some of our characters. I do believe that there will be some characters that exit from the show. And I mean, I can predict now. I think Alice going off to college, I could see her character leaving the show, or at least not being a mainstay. I think that you could even write into the show where maybe Gaby, especially after this episode, might have less parts in another season. I think you could definitely make the case that Harrison Ford's character, Paul, won't be in the show as well. Or if he is, it would be very random as to when he would return, because it sounds like he is moving to Connecticut where his daughter is to spend time with his grandkids as Parkinson's progresses. And it does seem like Julie's in that same time frame where she could retire or move her practice and work if she really wanted to. But I think they're both at the age of retirement. They both can go on and live a very happy life in retirement in Connecticut, where Meg, Paul's daughter, lives. So I do think Paul is definitely gone. I think Alice is definitely gone for and I think because Jimmy stays around, obviously we'll get some Alice every once in a while. But I do see where, I mean, she's going to be a senior. I think that she would move on. Her and her friend are both seniors. I think they could move on. We haven't gotten too much on Sean's story, but I think as the season wraps up, we're going to get more and more Sean, and it does feel like he could eventually move on as well. So I'll be interested to see how season 3 ends. We still have 8, 9, 10, and 11. So that's 4 episodes left of the season. But I do feel that a lot of their storylines are coming to a nice end, at least for this iteration of Shrinking. And then we'll get, I'm pretty sure we're going to get more Jimmy. And I'm pretty sure because I think Jason, I think he co-created or works on the show just as much as Bill Lawrence does. So, and I'm not even sure. Like Bill's been spending a lot of time with Rooster, so and I think he's been away for Ted Lasso as well. So, and Bill's kind of just overseeing all those projects. They have really good. So Sudeikis does Ted Lasso, Zach Braff does Scrubs, and Jason Segel does Shrinking, I believe, with Krista Miller. So I just wonder how these characters will progress. I think Jimmy, like I said, I could see a storyline, and I do think that a show with Sophie and Jimmy could uh carry the load, and then they would still maybe Gabby sticks around, but I do think Liz and Derek are pretty solid and will stick around. So we'll see. And then you got Brian and Charlie as well. So I think that you could add in all sorts of different things to this to make it to where the show keeps going. And maybe Gabby does, maybe Gabby does move on and has her own practice, and where she's dealing with more and more people like Maya, where she is in the trenches and really trying to get a handle of owning her own practice and then dealing with more trauma based therapy. So let's get into this episode because I don't want to give too much away in the way we were discussing it. But again, it does seem that Shrinking season 4 will be similar but not exactly the same, and we'll talk about it as we got a lot of information on Paul's journey. We've gotten some breaking news on Gabby's journey and Alice as well. So Jimmy and we'll talk about Jimmy first. Jimmy in this episode, I thought was his storyline was top notch. I think this was one of the best storylines I think I can remember from Shrinking for Jimmy. And I think, it's obviously dealing with grief, and we've talked about this multiple times that Jimmy seems to be very happy helping others through grief, but when it comes to his own, when it comes to facing the fact that he is going through something, he's not as accepting of even his own teachings to try to get through things. And Alice points this out this episode, which I thought was brilliant, and I thought the way that this came up was wonderful. I think that the way they've developed Jimmy and Alice's characters in this show allows for the advice that Alice gives to Jimmy that I think really moves the needle forward in Jimmy's grieving process. So, Jimmy at the beginning of the episode is talking with Alice about the fact that it is Tia's birthday coming up. I think it would be technically this episode, it would be for tomorrow. So tomorrow is Tia's birthday. Jimmy and Alice are having that conversation. And this is happening at the dinner table, which I love these scenes that they're doing at the dinner tables. They've got Alice's friend there. They have Sean is also there at the table. They're giving Jimmy a hard time. And Alice comes in and announces during this table scene that the gymnasium at Wesleyan is closing. And so because of that, things got shifted around. And she's actually going to have to report early for soccer training because some of the facilities won't be available at the time that she'll normally go. So she's going to have to report early to get her training, her preseason training going with Wesleyan on the soccer the women's soccer team. And so she announces to Jimmy that she's going to have to leave, I think right after graduation, like a week after graduation, which is pretty normal for, especially because I think soccer typically college soccer is a fall sport. So I know a lot of soccer teams play in the spring in some of the South, and then definitely in the North, they play in the spring. But this is this is a fall sport in college, and so she's going to have to report right after graduation. Probably a week or so is typically that timeline. So she's got to go. And Jimmy was like, "Well, that sucks because I had all sorts of plans with you before you left for college. You know, I wanted to travel, wanted to go to the beach." He has a line where he says, "I wanted to stare at you." Like it was just so Jimmy. And Jason's so good at this. I mean, he does this in How I Met Your Mother as well. He's just got this way about him that just makes him so very likable. He's very goofy, but also can hit a real serious chord at times, as we've seen through this episode. He is, I mean, I don't know how many people are as familiar with his work. I know, he does, yeah, I think he did Yes Man. He's in the Muppets, but if you've not really appreciated Jason's work, definitely go and watch other things that he is in. He is my favorite character in How I Met Your Mother. I love him as Marshall. And just though, he's kind of a at times a bumbling idiot, but very smart. He's very smart in How I Met Your Mother as well. He's a lawyer, but and in this he's a shrink. But it just he's the way that he plays it. He's just so lovable, so goofy. The guy's just having the time of his life. And I know he's talked about. I mean, he's had to leave Hollywood at times because it's just become too overwhelming for him. But he every time he is in something, I thoroughly enjoy the work and stuff that he does. And I love Jason so much. But in this episode, he's fantastic. Probably he steals scenes. He really does. But yeah, Jimmy's just not ready for that shorter goodbye. They give him a hard time. Alice's friend's like, "I'll move in with you," so because it's just gonna be him and Sean, and you can tell Jimmy's like, "Should I let her move? Nah, that's weird. Like, I don't know." But again, it's setting up the fact that Jimmy would be technically alone, even though Sean lives in the pool house. But I think we're gonna get to a point here relatively soon where I think even Jimmy tries to get Sean to move on, or Gabby gets Sean to move on from Jimmy's pool house and really starts to live. And maybe it's with Marisol. Maybe that's where we're headed. But I do feel like that was the things that have been mentioned are kind of alluding to something down the road where Jimmy's going to be at the house by himself, and maybe he sells that house. Maybe there's a lot of memories tied to that. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but and if he does sell the house, then maybe that means different things for Derek and Liz. But I just don't know. I have a hard time seeing maybe it's not like a massive house. I mean, he's got a pool house and a pool area like out or like a real big backyard and stuff. But I don't know. It seems like unless Jimmy's planning on settling down again and maybe getting married again, I doubt he would have another kid at his age. But who knows? Like you never know. But it just seems like that house would be a little too big for an empty nested Jimmy. And maybe that's kind of what happens towards the end of this season is he starts to look to move on. And I could see maybe wanting to get out of a house where you'd have so many memories with your ex-wife, Jesus, your widowed wife, who again, we get a lot of in this episode. So there is a moment in this episode where Jimmy is singing, and it's the song, I think it's called Thousand Years. And I'm trying to pull up who it's by. If you've seen Twilight, it's in Twilight. It's by Christina Perry. A Thousand Years is what it's called. It's a really great song. It's sort of sad and happy at the same time. And Jason, I think Jason actually plays the piano, if I'm not mistaken, and he loves to sing. He's not the greatest vocalist, but he's got a good enough voice to where it sounds good. But he will always take, like in How I Met Your Mother, he sang all the time, like random things. But he sings in this, and it is so very good. He's singing, and then it pans up, and Tia's in there, and so obviously this is a flashback, and you can kind of see around the screens. Or the corner of the screens is a little cloudy, and it kind of has like a different kind of tone, like more sepia kind of tone. And he's singing A Thousand Years, and he has Tia break off, and Tia starts to sing, and there's a part where she goes, "And how to be brave" is the lyric, but she says how to be grape. And he stops playing. He goes, "Did you just say how to be grape?" And she goes, Yeah, that's and he goes, "That's not what the word is. Like, how can you be grape, Tia?" She goes, "I can be whatever I want, Jimmy. It's my birthday." So this is talking about her birthday as it's leading up to her birthday tomorrow. And obviously, she Jimmy's reeling with this. There's only been one birthday, I think, in between Tia's death, and so this would be the second birthday that they've had of Tia's that has happened since her death, and it's such a cute moment. I mean, you can really see how good their relationship was together, and you can tell they just love each other. Such a loving moment, a deep and an emotional moment. And we later find out that this was a pretty common thing for the family to do. He would sit and she would sing, and Alice would come down and sing, and they'd have these family nights where they would just basically get into tunes and just have a good time singing and laughing and dancing and all sorts of fun things. So again, this was a really nice way for them to all connect. And Alice remembers these times fondly because she references it in a walk that she, uh, Brian and Jimmy have later on in the episode. And she says that she misses grape nights, which is what they started to call it, which is why the episode name is I Will Be Grape. And it it was such a cute moment, and then later on in the episode, and I think it's the same scene actually, it it pans so close into him, and then it gets closer to his face, and then it changes scenes obviously, but it's still the same kind of feel where he's playing the piano and then he's singing in the dark and he's singing 1,000 years and then she's not there obviously. So you flash back into the present and there he is without Tia singing this song, and it's just the solemn in which he sings this, the grief you can hear in his voice. It really hit home, and I felt that Jason just crushed this moment, and it builds up to an even greater moment at the end of the episode, which we'll get into. But that, like I said, this conversation or his conversation with Alice is that he's still grieving his wife's death and her mother's death, and he's still trying to move past it. So he's not quite there yet. So the next day, Alice wakes up and she is up because of her alarm. It goes off, and then Gabby calls right when the alarm goes off, and so Alice picks up the phone, and Gabby asks, "How is Jimmy doing, and how are you doing?" And she goes, "I'm fine, but I feel like today is going to be mostly about me picking my dad up from however he's really gonna be going through it." So Alice is upstairs in her room saying, Gabby, like, he's probably really going through it. And Gabby said that she had gone to Tia's gravesite today to wish her happy birthday with Derek and Derek 2.0. And then she goes, "Yeah, we were sitting there, and then these two butterflies flew by having sex midair. And I just felt that was so very Tia." And Alice goes, "Yeah, that sounds like mom would have sent that. That's funny." But just kind of a sign. I think Gabby and Derek are headed for much more in life together, which is pretty cool. And but it was a good moment, but it clearly shows that Gabby and Alice still believe that Jimmy is so much into grief still that he is going to have a real tough time with now his wife's birthday, the day of her birthday. So Alice actually goes downstairs and Jimmy is cooking an omelet and they're doing the pew 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 sound. And when she walks down, and Brian's like, "What was the like? No, no, Jimmy, it's more pew pew pew, like more animated, more fun." And then Jimmy just can't get it. And then he starts doing the arms real crazy. And Alice is like, "What the hell is going on?" And Jimmy then says, I realize that it's your mom's birthday, but something I was thinking about last night and then this morning again was the fact that this is this is the last birthday of mom's where you're going to still be here and not off to college, and I want to make sure that it's a special day. And Alice is very much like, "Wow, this is different." And then all of a sudden Jimmy starts to get real, like, I think they call it face lowering or something like that. And Brian like, "No, no, 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 don't let that face droop. What are you doing?" And Alice goes, "No, no, 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 don't." And almost like he's gonna cry. And Jimmy's like, "I'm fine. I pew pew pew." And he's very sad. But they're talking about, what they're going to do for the day. And then like, I think they say they have like exciting plans. And then all of a sudden it pans to them with Alice's friend. It's Sean, it's Alice, it's Brian. And then, no, I don't think Sean's there actually. No, it's just Jimmy. Yeah, it's just Jimmy, Alice, Brian, and the friend, and they're all standing there. They all have these like shirts on that Tia had bought them that are problematic. And Jimmy's is something like, "What's that smell? It's up dog," or "That smell is up dog," because that later on comes as a joke. You've got Brian's shirt that says he's a female body inspector, which is funny for a gay man. You have Alice's that says something along the lines of like, it's better to be half Asian than not Asian at all. And then the redheaded friend, I forget her name's, her shirt says that redhead or gingers are people too. And it's just really funny because Tia's bought all these people's shirts and they're like, yeah, we're wearing your problematic shirts that you bought us, which was really a funny joke. And then Brian goes, man, that looks kind of like a handsomer Lewis. And it pans over, and there's Brett Goldstein as Lewis. And Lewis is walking over, and Jimmy's like, that is Lewis. And so I guess Alice invited Lewis to come out, and she goes, I didn't think he would actually come out here. And Jimmy's like, yeah, okay, yeah, like I guess that's nice of him. But there is the person that put Tia in a grave coming to her gravesite, all dressed up in a suit, and he's talking about how life great or how great life is. He's got a new job. The girl that he's seeing is called Tuppence, which is a really funny joke because he says that later on in the episode to Brian, and Brian's like, "What?" Jimmy and Brian are like, "Wait, what's her name?" And he goes, Tuppence. She goes, where she works in like finance in the banks, which is a great kind of nod towards Tuppence a bag from Mary Poppins. I thought that was a funny joke. But the fact that her name is Tuppence, I mean, nobody, I don't think, is actually named Tuppence. But that's Lewis's new girl, and it shows that he has moved on and that he was able to move past it, moving away to San Diego. He's been able to find life again, and everybody's so very happy for Lewis. They go and then play Chubby Bunny, which, if you're not familiar with the game, they put as many marshmallows in your mouth as possible until you can no longer say Chubby Bunny, where it's where you can actually hear Chubby Bunny. And the most people, or the people that can fit the most amount of marshmallows in their mouth while trying to say and can say Chubby Bunny, win the game. They get as many as they can in their mouth, and then Lewis starts to choke on the marshmallows. And everybody, it's funny because Jimmy's like, all the marshmallows are coming out of his mouth because he's like, oh no, like they're all like dropping the marshmallows out of their mouth because they're like, oh my god, it's gonna kill us. And Brian goes over and he's like trying to give Lewis the Heimlich, and he finally gets the marshmallows dislodged. And it was really funny because Brian turns to him and goes, wow, T almost got you back, which I thought was really good. And then you can see, if you go back, I had to watch the second time I picked up on it. I didn't see it the first time, but if you go back and you look, Jimmy's standing over the side and he goes, when Tia almost got you back, Jimmy gives the thumbs up like, good job, honey. He almost killed him. So it was good. I really enjoyed that. And so Jimmy, again, I think it's trying to show the difference, the contrast between, Lewis, who was the one that took Tia's life because of the drunk driving. He is now moved on and happy. Alice is using it more of a, why can't you do the same? And so later on, the conversation comes up when they're in Alice's bedroom. Jimmy goes up and he goes, how do you like my party outfit? So they're having a party for Tia's birthday. And that's when Alice was like, tell me when you put it on. And he goes, ouch, that hurt. But they have that fun banter, and Alice goes, how are you doing? Like, how you doing with all this? And, he kind of gives that same response he always does. I'm fine. We'll get through it. And she goes, I'm tired of this. I'm tired of you acting like everything's going to be fine when it's now been like 2.5 years, 3 years since her death. And you're still at that same point where you're still grieving and you're afraid to move on. She goes, I can't go off to, how can I go off to college knowing that you're going to be sitting here in the dark, grieving mom's death and know that you're not going to be okay? How am I supposed to leave you here? Like, bad things could happen to you if I leave you here in that state. And he's like, no, that's not like, I'll be fine. I'm proud of you. And Then he kind of like deflects. Like I was trying to figure out like where this, because she doesn't really push him anymore towards that. He then sort of deflects it almost like, well, I hope you know that I'm proud of you. And it's kind of a weird deflection, but he's like, I'm proud of you. And the way that you've turned out, I know you're going to go out there and kick ass in life. And that is enough for me to get by, basically. And your mom and I are proud of you. And it was like this, it was a good moment, but it also felt kind of like a deflection. It was like Jimmy didn't want to talk about that anymore. So that was interesting to me. He didn't really confront that, or he really answered to what Alice had confronted him with. It's kind of deflecting on how proud he is of Alice and put it back on Alice of like, you're great. Your mom would be proud, which was really weird. Like Jimmy just doesn't want to talk about it, which is really strange because I feel like Alice would be the one person that he could really connect with because it was her mother. And I do think that they could share different stories that would help him get through it. But yeah, Jimmy still seems very deflective for it. He wanders off and he's like, "Well, if you promise to be normal, I'll be normal." And it's really funny because he goes, "Normal, normal," and he starts walking like a robot. And she goes, "Well, you're such an idiot! Like, what are you doing?" So he tries to act as normal as possible, but you can tell he still is obviously in a stage of grief where he's just not ready to really move past it. However, he does take a step because at the end of the episode, they are all gathered around the piano. They're all singing the "A Thousand Years" again, and they've got a bowl of grapes, which I thought was a beautiful touch. They're all talking and singing and having a great time. And then it gets to a point where Sophie jumps in, are played by Kobe Smulders, and we finally get Sophie back in, and Jimmy has obviously reached out and asked her to come over. She starts to sing, and he stops playing, and he's like, oh, "You kind of jumped in at an earlier point where you're not supposed to." And she goes, "Oh, sorry, I'm just kind of nervous because it's like your dead wife's birthday, or like our first date is also your dead wife's birthday, and like all your family and friends are here, so I'm meeting them all on the first date." So just like it was a weird circumstance. It would have been a really strange first date. But that being said, Sophie is so great. I think she understands where he's coming from with this. And I think she feels appreciative that she's been included because obviously Jimmy cares for her. And this is that first step towards showing that he does really care for her. And I think he sees her as somebody he does want to pursue and date. So they're on their first date, and that was a really good comment. But then it was really funny because I think at one point after that, Sean was like, "I love your little poofy shoulders," because she was wearing like the shoulders. I don't even know how to. I'm awful with women's clothing, but they're like very fringed and like very poofy looking shoulders on like a dress she was wearing. And then Liz was like, "Oh, I like your flowy hair," and they were all just like complimenting how beautiful she is. And she's overwhelmed at this point of like all the compliments and all the things going on and having to deal with. But they're all sitting around this piano having a really great moment. And it does, Jimmy gives Sophie kind of the "I'm glad you're here" look. And then he looks to Alice, and Alice is like, that's what you need. Like, this is what I was talking about. I'm happy for you. I want you to be able to move on. And Jimmy kind of gives her a nod of like, "Yeah, I understand. Like, I understand this is what you meant. And I hope it's okay if I move on. And like, I'm not forgetting your mom," kind of thing. And I'm sure this will come up at some point again where maybe Alice feels like she's being replaced, or Jimmy feels like he's replacing Tia. But it's not that. Again, we've talked about this in multiple episodes. It's just that's so hard, right? To move on after you've lost the love of your life, to have to then find somebody else that you want to spend life with. And it's just the amount of emotions, and you would feel like you're betraying them. I can only imagine what that feels like, which is just awful. But yeah. So that's where Jimmy and Alice, I mean, throughout the episode, it's heavily Jimmy, Alice, and then very heavy into Gabby and Paul. So let's do Paul next. Paul in this episode is continuing his conversations of like how he moves on. He's talking to Jerry at one point, and his other patient, which is Ron, or no, not Ron, Ray. So Ray is played by Neil Flynn, who is the janitor from Scrubs, so another Bill Lawrence guest star. And he's been in 6 episodes at this point. He's one of the patients for Paul, and Paul's talking to Jerry and Ray sitting on the couch. Jerry is played by Michael J. Fox. Jerry is obviously struggling with Parkinson's and real life portrayal of Parkinson's and what he goes through. We have him ask Ray what's wrong with him, and he goes, "Well, I've got stage 1 colon cancer. I think it's colon cancer or prostate cancer. Yeah, I think it's prostate. I got stage 1 prostate cancer." And Jerry's like, they get into like this competition, and he goes, "Well, it's not too bad. Like, you're allowed here, but it's not worse than Parkinson's." And then Ray goes, "Yeah, I have a hard time peeing at times. Like, just can't go." And that's when Jerry goes, "Well, I can't pee all the time. Most of the time I can't pee." So, and then Paul goes, "Well, it's not a competition, guys, like of who's suffering the most." But they get into talking about like the stages of Parkinson's and what he's dealing with. He's got now, I think they call it bilateral, where it's affecting both hands. Soon he's going to get to a point where the tremors are so bad he can't pick things up very well, or he's going to really start to struggle here physically, and he's really starting to get into a deeper stage of Parkinson's and dealing with it. But it was more of the conversation of dealing with that, and then dealing with life going on around you, and then also I think bringing them all together to really, how do we appreciate what we have of life left, and or left of life. And I think that was the ultimate sticking point for me, was more of them trying to find people that are going through this similar type of thing to talk to, because Paul wants somebody to talk to that understands what he's going through, because he doesn't have that. And as many people have tried to figure this out, I don't think you can really get a good sense of it unless you talk to somebody that is also in that same situation, struggling with Parkinson's, or any kind of cancer. So I thought that was a really solid moment. It brings Michael back into the fold. It brought Neil Flynn back in, which they're both phenomenal actors. But this whole episode, he's talking to Julie, and he's talking to Julie about, I think he's doing more of a check of like, you still in this? We still good? And um, they yeah, Jimmy's like, or not Jimmy, Paul's like, "Are you good with this?" It's gonna get worse. And she's like, "I'm ready for it." But also, I think Paul is just mentally preparing himself. Julie is a doctor who's seen Parkinson's, who knows kind of those next steps and what he'll be dealing with. And so it's good to have her as a board as well, like a talking board. But yeah, no, I think Paul's whole thing in this episode is just trying to figure out what is next in life, physically, mentally, emotionally, with his kids, with his grandkids, with his wife. The fact that he's now going to be trying to get rid of his practice. He approaches Gaby in this episode about giving her the practice. She says, "I don't want it. Remember, I'm trying to work with people that are more like Maya, dealing with real trauma, dealing with real shit," as Gaby would often call it. And so she declines his offer of taking over the practice. I think the practice is going to Jimmy. Like, I just think that that's going to be who it goes to. And I think the end moment with them, that's why I feel that Paul is definitely going. Like, if I had to pick anybody that's going to leave, like Harrison Ford, because of the age, because of his commitment, like I could see him coming back every once in a while, but I do feel that he is wrapping up his time. He doesn't usually stick around too long on on a lot of projects, but yeah, I think he'll be done with the show for at least being a recurring. But I do think that Jimmy ends up with a practice, and Paul is still trying to reel with the fact of like, you know, he likes what he does. He still loves talking to people and helping people, but also knows that it's time. It's time to move on and time to take that next step in life. He has some more parts in this episode. We actually get consonants, which is I think it's consonant. What is the? Hold on one sec. I gotta pull up DB real quick. So Constance, who is played by Candice Bergen. Whoever has seen Boston Legal, she was Shirley Smith in Boston Legal. She's one of my favorite actresses. I haven't seen her in a while, so I was actually shocked to see her. She looks great. I mean, she's got to be 80 something at this point. Let me check IMDb. 46. So she's, yeah, right at 80. Um, and so she's great. She is Derek's mother in this show. She has this like sass. She's always had this like sassiness. She portrays sassiness very well. Very strong woman. And but the whole reason I bring her up was because Paul then has to help out Liz and Constance. So let's go to Liz here. Liz, this whole time, is obviously dealing with Derek coming out of heart surgery. Derek's recovering well. However, because his mother is in town, so Liz's mother-in-law is in town, and Liz does not get along with Constance. They do not have a good relationship. She's never given Constance a rock, which becomes an ongoing joke in this episode. Like everybody has a rock but Constance. She's like, why the hell hasn't she given me a rock? Liz gives rocks to everybody. And Liz is like, well, maybe you don't deserve a rock, basically. Like she doesn't say it forward, like very forward to her, but she's basically like, you don't fucking deserve a rock because of the way you treat me. Which is, it's very mother-in-law-ish, monster-in-law-ish, as I would say. But she's never given Liz the acceptance that she's wanted. She's never really thanked Liz for anything or told her anything without being very spiteful and very sarcastic in the way that she says it. In this episode, Liz talks to Gaby that the monster-in-law is in town, and she goes, every time she comes and talks to me, she is actually really nice to me, very complimentive, but she lingers long enough with the stare to basically be like, I'm joking with you, I'm fucking with you, I actually don't appreciate you, which is a really funny part of this episode, I thought. And she does it every time she talks to her. Like one time she compliments how beautiful she looks, but then just like stares at Liz like, I'm not being honest, I'm kind of being an ass. And it was really funny. She does it a lot. She doesn't like the way that, or it appears that she doesn't like the way that Liz is dealing with Matthew's situation, who is still really floundering, trying to find a job and get on his feet as a 25-year-old. And Liz and her have this falling out where they're like in the kitchen and they're going after each other. And she goes, you're such a nasty ass. Like, you're so mean to me. Why are you so fake? Blah, blah, blah. And then the Constance, Derek's mother, is like, well, why are you so awful to me? You've never given me the time of day. And they have this big blow up. They then have a moment where Paul comes in, and he comes in the kitchen, and Constance is standing at the kitchen counter, and then Liz walks in, and they're talking about Paul brought over it's like a picker or a grabber so that Derek doesn't have to bend over, because he's not supposed to bend after open heart. So he's just got to grab stuff off the ground with this picker instead of bending down to pick it up. And so Paul brought it over because Julie said that he would want it. He first runs into Constance, and then Liz comes in and they introduce who they are. And Paul, kind of very friendly, very amicable. And then Liz walks off to go find Derek. And Paul then gets in a conversation with Constance, and Constance is basically like, how come she's never given me a rock? How come my daughter-in-law seems to really just despise anything that I say, do? How come she doesn't want my advice? Like, I've gone through life. Why isn't my daughter-in-law taking my advice? And Paul says, have you noticed that the younger people in our lives, most of the time, don't want our advice? They don't really want our input because they want to try to figure this stuff out themselves. And because as they get older, they feel that they are more independent, that they're not dependent on us anymore. And that's kind of what, and that's what Paul's point is that, as time has gone on, she's an adult. Like, Liz will come to you if she needs your advice. And I think you can't just force advice on somebody just because you're older, because sometimes they won't listen to that. It's when people come to you and ask for advice, that's when they're obviously going to be more receptive to it. And I think that's what Paul's trying to get across to Constance. In all of this, Constance has told many people to call her Connie. She told Gaby. So Gaby comes over at one point because Liz wants her to come see the monster-in-law and how that weird eye contact is happening. And Gaby's like, damn, you're right. Like, this lady's ice cold. And they call her Connie. Or Constance goes, you can call me Connie, to Gaby. Paul, you can call me Connie. Like, everybody call me Connie except for Liz. Liz still calls her Constance and goes, Yeah, and but it was really funny because Constance is giving Liz a very hard time throughout this whole episode. Liz comes back downstairs. They can't find Derek 1.0, and they're very concerned. Obviously, his heart pillow's there, but Derek is not. They go and find him. He's out at the park, and he's sitting on a bench. And he before this, he had seen the two argue, and he got mad and he threw his hand at him, like whatever, and he just leaves the house. Come to find out, and they find him on the bench. They scare him, and it's funny because Paul goes, "Maybe don't scare the guy that has just recently had heart surgery." But they get in this conversation like, Derek, what the hell? You can't just leave the house. You need supervision at all times. You never know what's going to happen. He goes, I had to get the hell out of the house because you guys weren't taking care of me. Actually, you were doing the exact opposite. You were hurting me because you two are always arguing, and the tension was causing me stress. And I'm not supposed to be stressed because it's bad for my heart. And he goes, one of you have to leave the house, or both of you leave the house, actually. And he's actually, no, actually, one of you needs to stay because of my heart. It probably should be my wife. And this is like, probably. And he goes, it should be my wife. My wife should take care of me. Not my mother. And so that was a really funny joke, but it was causing a lot of stress and tension on Derek. And so they go, Derek gets up and he goes, you two figure it out. And he and Paul walk away. Constance and Liz have a conversation, and it's very good. So in this episode, we find out one thing, that Matthew is still trying to find a job, and at one point he gives Constance like these new Jordan shoes that come out that he got on some kind of drop, and they're like $100, like $300 or $400 shoes, or $800. They're really expensive. And she asked how he afforded it, and then he goes, "Well, what I do is I buy shoes on," this is a very common hustle that a lot of kids do these days, where they'll buy shoes and then resell them at a higher price off of drops. And Constance goes, "Well, that could be your job. I think you could do that for a living because you're so good at it." And Liz is like, "That's not a job. Like, stop giving him bad advice." So, Liz is trying to suggest, like, at one point suggested he should become a physical therapist because of how well he takes care of Derek. That he should go work at one of the restaurants. Like, he's just very good with customer service. Like, Liz is just trying to push him towards jobs, whereas Constance gives him this. I mean, it would be very hard to make it a job, but if he's good at it, it could be a job where he's flipping shoes. And so, that they have that conversation. So we're back on the park bench, and that conversation is alluded to where Constance goes, why don't you listen to my advice? And Liz is more, talking about the fact that, like, ever since she's been around, it feels more like nagging, and that you're attacking me, and you don't think I'm a good mother. You don't think I'm good at what I do. You don't respect me. And Constance is like, that's not it at all. Like, I'm just trying to do what's best for you and for Derek. And I'm trying to keep all these things into consideration, but yeah, maybe I could be a little bit better. And they come to a realization that they both could be better at handling their relationship. And then Constance turns to Liz and says that, I think you're she goes, I struggled with raising Derek's brother. Derek's brother was the exact same as Matthew, except he's still like that. And now he's, 50 or 60 at this point, and I failed. Whereas Matthew is still, it's recoverable. Like, Liz can still help him and is still trying to help him. And now Connie realizes how much she's tried to help him. The kid just has not been receptive of it. And Connie says, I failed with one kid. You have two very good boys. Like, they're wonderful kids. You raised really great kids. They're very empathetic. They're nice. They try their best. They're doing life well. And she goes, I think you're doing a wonderful job. And then Liz like, well, thank you. You've never said that to me. And she goes, no, I feel like I should, because you do a phenomenal job. And I think some of that too is Connie's trying to do better with her grandkids, because she did not do well with one of her sons. So I think she's trying to, make up for that some. So maybe that's why she overcompensates a little and gets into Liz's way. But Liz is very appreciative of that. You can tell they're now going to have a good relationship. It's really funny. She goes to reach over and grabs Connie's shoulder, and she goes, no, we're not that close yet. Like, we're not there yet. Don't touch me. But It is. It's going to be a healthier relationship, obviously moving forward. I do wonder how many more episodes that Candace will be in, but I thought she was great as Constance. Great casting. I love her so much, and I really loved her in Boston Legal. She was one of my favorites as Shirley. But yeah, last but not least, let's get into Gaby. With Brian, we don't get too much of conversation. The only thing that Brian, it was funny. Brian has really good moments. Obviously, the gravesite. He's got a really good moment where he's very like probing to the nanny, and then Jimmy's like, "This kid's gonna need therapy," but the nanny's also gonna quit because Brian's a wacko. The way that he's raising his kid. And then we also get a really funny one when they're on the hike when Jimmy and Alice and Brian go on a hike, talking about Alice or talking about Tia and Grape Night. Brian goes, "You know when I'm feeling sad, what I really like to do? I like to come out here and they're on a hiking trail, like in the hills of California." And he's like, "I like to come out here and yell at people that have their headphones in that can't hear me, but I like to be very rude towards them." And so he says something about, "Oh, there's a guy that has like a floppy hat on and like a mask and then like ear covers." Like he goes, "If you didn't like being out in the sun, then why'd you come out and walk in the sun, you idiot?" Like basically, like you're a jerk for walking. Like what are you thinking? You're gonna get, no sun walking in the sun. You cover it up like a mummy. And so they kind of laugh at that. And then he goes, "Here, Jimmy, try it with that old guy right there." The old guy's walking with one of those walking sticks. And he goes, "Hey, Grandpa, I like your walking stick." And the old guy hears it, and he goes, "Oh, thank you." And then he starts to explain what the benefits of it are. And the guy had no idea he was being a jerk. And then the old guy walks away, and Jimmy goes, "Damn it, Brian, I hate you." Brian goes, "Those," or Alice goes, "Those were hearing aids." And Brian goes, "Yeah, he hears pretty well with those. Those weren't headphones." So that was a solid moment. But Brian, I mean, really good side things from Brian, but we didn't get too much of his character development in this episode. We did get a ton with Gaby. So, like I said, Gaby is again still trying to find her place. She gets a call from, or no, sorry, at one point in the episode, she gets a text or a message from Maya that Maya is going to cancel a session. Gabby's like, "No, like let's not cancel. Like let's make sure we talk at least somewhat somewhere. So call me back." She returns a phone call. They don't actually get in contact with each other. Uh, we have Gaby, who, and later on in the episode, she declines the offer because she wants to deal with more patients like Maya, who are really suffering through things on a, really deep in depression. Committing suicide is something that they think about. So that's what Gaby wants to deal with, people that are really suffering and struggling through life. So she wants to deal more with that, deeper things. And then we get Gaby at the piano when they're all singing and when Sophie's there, and she keeps getting missed calls from a patient. And this patient, if you guys remember, is Donna. And Donna is the patient that actually recommends. So Donna and Mark are the couple that were seeing Gaby. Actually recommended that Maya goes to Gaby because they were coworker slash friend, and that's when Maya started to see Gaby. And so you get a bunch of missed calls from Donna, and obviously this isn't going to be good. She walks out of the room and answers the phone. She goes, "Hey, Donna, what's going on?" And Donna, you don't hear any of what Donna says at all in this conversation, but then you hear Gaby say, "Whoa, whoa, whoa, slow down, slow down. What do you mean? What do you mean? What do you mean we lost Maya?" And then it sad, like the 1,000 year happy singing that was going on in the living room turns to sad version of the song instrumental. And we assume that Maya's dead, that she has committed suicide because Gaby hadn't been there. And this wasn't Gaby's fault, but when Maya last episode, or when she was trying to call Gaby and Gaby wasn't answering, or no, she answered but was busy. Maya was at a point where she was contemplating killing herself, and she doesn't answer the phone. So now naturally Gabby's going to think because she didn't answer the phone, that's why Maya kills herself. And so we're going to get into suicide, and this is going to be a really deep episode. This next one, just awful. It's something that again is very common, and a loneliness epidemic that is sweeping the world. I think it's due into the fact that we are consumed so much by technology. And I do think that as we've gotten further into the things that we have are trying to tackle right now as a society. I think it's caused a lot of loneliness. I think we've gotten better about talking about mental health. I do think that unfortunately, though, more people are suffering and struggling with mental health. Um, and I do think that the increase in cases that we're seeing with mental health is not due in the fact that there's more people dealing with mental health as much. It's probably more to do with the fact that people are able to recognize it now, where back then it was almost taboo to speak about mental health, especially in men. And I would even say women talking about depression, like people would just go, "No, you're just sad," where that's not the case. And I think that there is still a lot of conversations that need to happen about mental health. It just I think unless you're going through it, and I'm not somebody that I mean, I'm very fortunate to the fact that I just don't have a lot of issues with mental health. I get anxious every once in a while, but not to a point where I have anxiety or anxiety attacks. I am fortunate enough to know I have people to talk to, but I think there's some people out there in the world that are afraid to talk to somebody that have been taught that they shouldn't talk to people. Again, you just you don't know what people are going through. And I think it's so very important that you remember that when you're interacting with people and asking people if they're okay. And it's okay to check on people. It's okay to not be okay. And so I think that those conversations that we center around mental health and suicide prevention, I think that those are serious conversations that we're still having. And I think that we'll continue to have. And in this case, I mean, Gabby's fallout from this, she was considering opening her own practice, dealing with this kind of stuff. And when you're dealing with this kind of stuff, like that stuff's going to happen. People will commit suicide, people will kill themselves. And, there's not sometimes things that you can really do about it. I mean, you can try to help them as much as possible, but sometimes it's beyond help. Sometimes you're just not there fast enough to help. And, I think Maya probably really struggled with demons that she hadn't even told Gabby yet. So again, I do wonder. I wonder if we get a big falling out here. I don't know what the future will look like. Um, I feel that Gabby is going to have these moments of like, do I actually want to do this anymore at all? And so those will be conversations answered in the next couple of episodes. And I think that we'll get some real big discussion on suicide and what that looks like from a therapist point of view, because I'm sure that many therapists at this point have dealt with people or cared for people that are suicidal or contemplating that and have lost patients to that. And, it's just, you never know with mental health where people stand. So be kind to everybody, be kind to one another, reach out to your friends, ask if they're okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to admit that you're not okay and to seek the help that you need. Hopefully you can find your help resources. There's tons of them out there. And we'll get talking about what all that fallout's going to be next episode um, with the death of Maya. So really, really powerful episode, really sad, really happy, a range of emotions. I felt like I was on a roller coaster ride this episode, which is always what shrinking does well. That's what Bill Lawrence does well. Bill Lawrence does well with, I've talked about this with Scrubs. It happens in Ted Lasso, maybe a little less because Ted Lasso is much more positive. Scrubs is this way too, though. But Bill Lawrence and his writers have a knack for turning a very happy, fun, energetic, kind of goofy at times, maybe not so serious at times, episodes into these like earth-shattering, horrific, sad turns, plot twists. Like he is so good at taking a knife from out of nowhere and just stabbing you in the heart with it. It is what has made his show so brilliant. Um, Scrubs does this a ton where you'll go through this episode of like it's a feel good episode, and all of a sudden it takes a turn and it is not feel good anymore. It's the way of life, though, man. Like trauma doesn't have an entry point whenever it's most convenient. trauma happens whenever trauma wants to. And you could be having the best day of your life and bad things all of a sudden come up. So, and it's not every episode, it's not all the time, but Bill Lawrence, when he does do this, and the people that work with Bill do this, the writers that have been legacy writers with Bill, they had this really innate ability to be able to just make sure that that knife sticks hard when it comes. So, kudos to their writing staff. This is again another great example of that, and one of my favorite episodes of this season. So, overall, I'd give it a 9.5 out of 10. This was brilliant. I really like the writing in this, and I can't wait to see what next episode brings. I mean, season 3 is really picking up some steam here, and I can't wait to see what that all entails. But thanks for listening. Thanks for watching. If you have gotten this far, we are the Screen Society Podcast. You can find us over on socials, the Screen Society Podcast in the search bar. We have all sorts of different usernames. I'll try to include those in the show notes below. You can like, subscribe, and comment over on YouTube. You can see the video version of this podcast or the audio version anywhere you get your podcast. You can find us. Make sure to like, subscribe, rate, whatever you do over there. That way people can find us, and we can grow this community. But I've really enjoyed talking shrinking so far. Can't wait to get into season 3, episode 8, which will air next Wednesday. But until then, we will, I guess we'll see you later, and